When should a show be canceled? If it's really bad, that's probably a good place to start. If your lead actor has to go to rehab or engages in extensive sexual misconduct, those are also good reasons and should be pretty easy decisions.
What are we talking about? How much?
I don't know, man. I was banging 7-gram rocks and finishing them because that's how I roll. I have one speed, I have one gear. Go!
Also, if you're killing too many horses, as was the case with HBO's Luck, that can also get you canceled, actually. From the creative side, I think it's good to end, like with any creative pursuit, when it's becoming tedious to create or if you have a good ending in mind. And as you should be well aware, TV making is a business. Low viewership means low advertising revenue, and you're not even going to get the option to end on your own terms if you're not a successful enough show financially for the studio or network to keep around. All this in mind, it still boggles me why a show like Bojack Horseman, Netflix's best original series, a critical and cultural hit, a show that by all accounts did at least pretty well in terms of viewership and retention to the platform, and one that in fact did not kill any real horses, is canceled by executives. Why? I mean, you would think that there's a score that factors both quality and viewership, perhaps also awards, scheduling, and other miscellaneous items, that determines whether or not the network or the creative gets to make the call. Community, it's my favorite show, we all know the quality was there, but we also know that it wasn't scoring amazingly in the Nielsen ratings, so unfortunately that's going to have to be a network call. And it was, like multiple times. Breaking Bad, also a tier 1 show, but also massively popular, especially at the end, and because of that, it was a creative call, at least as much as any of this can be. But Bojack met all the criteria that it needed to be a creative call, right? Well, obviously not, and that's because Netflix criteria is different than mine, and probably yours as well, a bit more analytical. In a letter sent to a UK Parliament committee in 2019, Netflix defined success looking at 3 metrics, which they labeled starters, watchers, and completers. Starters are defined as households that watch 2 minutes of a film or 2 minutes of one episode in a series. Completers are households that watch 90% of a film or an entire season of a series. These are the 2 main data points, but there are also watchers, which Netflix outlines as households that watch 70% of a movie or one episode in a series. When Netflix advertises that Wednesday is their most popular show ever, watchers are whom they're referring to. Given that Netflix is a streaming platform that hosts its own content, it has the luxury of knowing everything about how a show is consumed. This includes when you pause, rewind, or fast forward, the specific time when you watch the content, probably somehow what you were eating when you watched, everything that they could possibly want to know about its audience tastes. My initial theory is that Bojack must have had not as many starters or watchers as you may think. Given that the first season just isn't as good as the rest of the series, and certainly not the easiest show to get into, it's easy to see why a less than ideal percentage of households did not complete the first season, nor the first episode. Episodes like the second of the series, Bojack Hates the Troops, feel like a completely different and more cheaply written comedy, and its pilot was fine, but not the page-turner that big shows like Stranger Things were for Netflix. But if this was the case, then it would have gotten canceled after season 1, so this argument makes no sense at all. The real reason I believe Bojack was canceled is the fact that Netflix is not a traditional network, and was and still is comparatively young within the landscape of Hollywood. Even in 2019, when the show was canceled, Netflix was just 12 years old, a little boy. It makes sense that Netflix is yet to have a sitcom or a soap or anything that stays on for more than 10 seasons like other major networks. Grace and Frankie, still Netflix's longest running series to date, only got 7 seasons, just one more than Bojack. Bojack's 6 seasons doesn't make it a long-running animated comedy like The Simpsons, Family Guy, SpongeBob, or South Park, but to Netflix, regardless of genre, it's the days of our lives, it's guiding light, it's General Hospital. While I think that trying to figure out why Netflix hasn't let a show go past the 7th season is an interesting topic for a different day, at least we can understand Bojack being canceled, it wasn't personal, and it also really wasn't just business. It was just that, even if successful, that's how many seasons you got. And before I talk about why the cancellation ended up really working out for the show, I want to talk about the sponsor of today's video, Aura. And it's a really important time to be talking about them because over 2.9 billion records were stolen from National Public Data, a service providing personal information for background checks. The stolen records include full names, addresses, birth dates, social security numbers, and phone numbers, which hackers have reportedly released for free online. What this means is that you've never been more vulnerable online than you are right now. But I'm not too worried about it because I have Aura. Aura alerts me if my personal info appears on the dark web, notifies me quickly if anyone tries to access my accounts, offers up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, and provides various online safety features, all in one app. You can go to my link, aura.com/comewatchtv, to try 14 days for free and find out if any of your personal data is exposed. And I would do this right now because national public data likely won't help or face consequences for this leak. Okay, back to Bojack. As much as I hate to say this as someone who wants to write for TV and lead a show based on creative notes as much as possible, the executives made a good call here. I don't know what it was. Maybe the writers and artists thought, this is it, gotta make this a masterpiece. Maybe it was to make Netflix fully realize what it was choosing to abandon, but season 6 is Bojack's best outing. And I'd rather have what we have now, a near perfect series, than a show that Family Guys or Simpsons or SpongeBob's it up. It was also pretty cool that Netflix had instructed showrunner Raphael Bob Waksberg before the season aired, and presumably before the season was written, that they would be canceling, fulfilling his request from all the way back in season 1 to, quote, have the forewarning to give the show a proper finale and not set up some cliffhangers that will never pay off. I never watched Bojack when it was airing, so viewing the show in its entirety, it didn't even feel remotely like the ending was not a creative decision. Seeing how its 16-episode, 2-part final season mirrored that of Breaking Bad's, I figured that it must have been Waksberg that made the judgment call, just as Vince Gilligan did for Breaking Bad. All of this just to say, Bojack's 6th season is impeccable, and just like Breaking Bad, it got better and better until the end of the season. It ended on a high note. But how did the announcement of a cancellation really affect the quality of the show? Well, I think the storytelling was forced to be much more focused in the season in comparison to others. Going back to the quote from Waksberg, the mere fact that they knew things were going to end meant that they could really write what they wanted and not have to worry about saying up anything that they may eventually get to later. Also, season 6 was noticeably more serialized than the rest of the show, which, on its own, isn't necessarily a good or bad thing, and it was still clearly an episodic show. But in the case of a show coming to a close, where we want to see characters complete their arcs, ongoing plots resolve, and a show really outline and hone in on its core themes and philosophy, I thought the increased focus on continuous plot lines enabled the audience to track and really cherish the characters' change over the course of the season. We got to see Bojack make progress in rehab, reconcile with those he had hurt, and experience a genuinely happy life as an acting teacher, only for his past mistakes to catch up to him when the story of Sarah Lynn's death breaks, causing him to spiral out of control, nearly die, and end up in prison. Thereafter, we witness the beginnings of a new life for Bojack, as he truly changes internally and honestly processes his past, is my interpretation of the ending. I know some people are more pessimistic about Bojack. But regardless, because of this continuous narrative, along with everything we are getting from the individual stories being told within each episode, the season feels super complete and satisfying, exactly what you should want in a final season of TV. And one could argue against this and say that trying to accomplish all of these things makes the story feel rushed, but outside of a few minor things, including PC's relationship with Judah, the season never felt rushed to me, and in fact felt just as deep and exploratory as any other season of the show, with episodes like The View from Halfway Down using a dinner party with those of Bojack's past to examine themes of mortality, remorse, and the inevitability of death. Ending the show perhaps earlier than expected also feels more true to its characters and the show's philosophy regarding the passage of time in our relationships. Throughout the show, we see many important characters move on from Bojack's life in a way that was different than how most sitcoms kept people around if they were enjoyed or wrote them off if they were despised. In Bojack, characters entered and exited naturally as people in our lives do. Sarah Lynn dies, Beatrice dies, Herb dies, Wanda leaves Bojack, as do many people in his life. In season 6, we got to see this in real time, not just with recurring characters, but with the 5 main characters of the show, all going their separate ways, and not just for the plot of the finale, but throughout the entire season. It's all very true to life, and Bojack knows better than anyone that change and the passage of time is relentless and inevitable. If Bojack, PC, Mr. Peanut Butter, Diane, and Todd all stayed together and continued this story as a long-running sitcom, it just wouldn't feel right. The show would start to feel more like Horsing Around than Bojack Horseman, going for comfort and familiarity as opposed to honesty and insight. Knowing that a show's final season will be its last is also good for the fans. Sure, they were rightfully pissed, no one wants their favorite show to end, but the fans were likely more encouraged to savor every episode in a way that they wouldn't have been able to without advance warning or a final season marketing push. So, to summarize, if you're a show, particularly a show hosted on Netflix, how do you not get canceled? You don't go on for over 6 seasons. And as a show, how do you take it well? You make the best season you've ever made.
Oh well, it was nice while it lasted, right?
This is Come Watch TV. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time.